He dragged her from the flood, and every rifle found him. On a flood-torn night at Cottonwood Crossing, Jesse Coulter waded into the brown water and dragged a native girl to shore. By morning, 5 tribal parties laid gifts at his gate, while the land company and cavalry planted stakes on his riverbank. Jesse tied a red cord from his gate to midstream and said, "I won't walk away." From then on, every rifle and every stare had to choose a side of that line. The wind came off chalk boots, carrying the dry bite of juniper and old rain. Jesse Coulter set his muddy boots by the door, knocked ash from the iron stove, and poured a mug of coffee black enough to stain a day. Out beyond the yard, the San Miguel wash had a different voice this morning. Hoarse, hurried like it knew trouble by name. He saddled Roni and rode toward Cottonwood Crossing to pull a bulky fence post before the flood chewed it loose. Halfway there, the air turned tight and heavy, thunder mumbling with no lightning to blame it on. Then he heard it, a thin cry cut short by water. Jesse slid from the saddle before the sound finished, tossed the reins, and ran the last yards down the clay bank. The wash wasn't a river so much as a brown animal, all shoulders and teeth. A swirl of dark hair flashed where the current bent around the cottonwoods. Jesse kicked free of his coat, kept his hat because sun and grit were worse than wet, and went in without a second thought. Cold bit him to the ribs. The force of the water took his knees, then his breath, and he let it take both while he angled downstream, counting heartbeats the way cowhands count miles. "Hold on," he said, "because a voice is a rope when you have none." The girl came up coughing, dress heavy as chain. Her hand scrabbled at the slick root of a cottonwood. The root snapped. She spun once, eyes open and wide, then slammed into him. He took that hit, locked a forearm across her chest, and kicked for the gravel tongue below the crossing. Twice the wash rolled them. Gravel skinned his knuckles. He lost the hat and didn't care. He planted his boots on something that held, shoved the girl up the bank until her fingers found willow brush, and drove his shoulder beneath her like a man heaving a full hay bale onto a wagon. They came out together, choking hard, mud slick and full of river. For a while there was only breathing. Roni stood above them blowing steam, reins trailing, patient as a priest. Jesse looped a wool scarf from his pocket around the girl's wrist to stop the shaking that ran through her bones. "You hurt anywhere?" he asked. She shook her head, water threading off her lashes. "Name's Nita Redbird," she said, voice rough but steady. "From Cedar Hollow." Jesse nodded once. Names could come later, heat could not. He lifted her to the saddle and walked beside, one hand to the horn, heading back over the flats while cloud shadow ran low and mean across the grass. At the yard, he got her. Inside, fed the stove, and set a dry blanket around her shoulders. The cabin took on the smell of wet cloth and singed cedar. He hung his soaked shirt on a peg and put coffee in her hand. She didn't thank him, and he didn't ask for it. Some things weren't traded. "River's still climbing," she said after a time, eyes on the door as if the wash might step through it. "It is. You don't have to keep me here." He looked at the scarf on her wrist, at the tremor fading there. Outside, the water talked louder, impatient. Jesse rolled fresh kindling between his palms, let the pieces tick into the fire, and spoke as if to the room, to the day, to whatever came riding with it. "I won't walk away." Roni stamped once in the lean-to. The stove popped and settled. Night came in early and stayed. Jesse pulled the extra blanket from the trunk and set it near the chair. He listened to the wash chewing at its banks and to the silence that sits in a house once the worst has passed and the next part hasn't started yet. He had work to do when the light returned, fence to brace, posts to set, but for now there was a life to keep warm and a door to keep shut against the river. He poured more coffee, handed it over, and took his place by the window. a man standing a simple watch on a complicated day. By noon, the flats went white and hard, heat ringing off the mesquite like hammered tin. Dust rose in slow sheets and held there. Jesse stepped out to the yard with a dipper of well water when he saw them. 5 parties riding in from 5 points of the compass, colors bright against the pale land. They halted at his fence as if the posts were marks on a map only they could read. The first elder swung down, hair bound with silver cones that clicked once when his boots touched dirt. 2 roads, Nita said under her breath, lifting a hand in respect. Men and women followed, each group setting a bundle at Jesse's gate without crowding the next. The gifts were plain and heavy with use, a fan of carved eagle feathers, a bone-handled knife wrapped in oiled buckskin, a blanket with red diamonds tight as a drumhead, an old pipe blacked by years, cakes of salt and a folded deer hide smelling of smoke. No speeches, just the careful way a thing is laid down when it stands in for a promise. 2 roads faced Jesse. "Word carried," he said. "You pulled a daughter from bad water." He glanced at Nita. "When a man keeps water from taking a life, he earns a place at the talk of how water's shared." Nita unrolled oilcloth and set a ledger on the fence rail. The cover was scuffed and honest. "Our water book," she said, "made by fathers of Cedar Hollow. Stone Horse, Willow Ridge, Red Bluff, Blue Mesa. 1 page is gone, the page that fixed late summer turns. Folks have argued that page for 2 seasons. Men died for it last fall." Jesse ran a thumb along the raw edge where paper had been torn. "You think I've got your missing line?" "We think you've got a yard nobody's bled on," 2 roads said. "Between the ford and the company stakes. A place to sit people down who don't sit easy." Nita added, "I can carry words right if men will say them plain." Behind them, young riders shifted, eyes sliding toward Jesse's rifle hanging inside the door. He took it down, broke the cylinder, and laid the rounds on the window ledge, one by one. Then he walked to the tool rack, came back with a red-stained stake and a length of cord. He drove the stake by the gate, tied the cord across to the corner post, and stepped back. "This yard is neutral ground," he said. "No gun comes up past that line. Any man who breaks that loses his say here, and his next turn at water." 2 crows, tall and raw-boned from Red Bluff, tasted the words like a man unsure of salt. "Your line holds chiefs and company men the same?" "The same," Jesse said. 2 roads looked at the cord, at the ledger, at the shade of Jesse's cottonwood. He nodded once. Women slid their baskets down and started a small cook fire in a ring of old horseshoes. A boy from Blue Mesa set a clay jar by the well and went to turning the windlass. The day settled into the shape of a meeting, not a standoff. Nita eased beside Jesse with 2 tin cups. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "Neither did you," he answered, taking one. The coffee was strong enough to stand a spoon, and just what a hard hour needed. On the far edge of the flats, another dust line lifted, where survey flags cut the land in straight, bright wounds. Jesse saw it and did not comment. The ledger lay open to the torn place. The cord hung quiet in the heat, and work waited on words. By mid-afternoon, the quiet broke. A square of men in canvas hats came up the section road, with a wagon of flags and a brass transit. Harlan Pike rode ahead, clean boots, clean gloves, a smile that did no work. Beside him loped Silas Vane, jaw full of tobacco. They halted at the red cord. Pike tipped his hat toward Nita's ledger as if it were a fair piece. "Mr. Coulter, Mesquite Land and Cattle appreciates cooperation. We'll set our dam yonder. Territorial papers are in order." He handed a packet tied with blue ribbon, deed maps, levee heights, a stamped notice if purchase proved inconvenient. Jesse read enough and passed it back. "Your stakes cut the ford." "Progress cuts what it must," Pike said easily. But we're not brutes. I'll take that riverfront at a gentleman's price. Silas spat and set a transit rod to punctuate generosity. Cavalry tack clinked. Captain Bram Hale arrived from Cottonwood Post with a dozen troopers, rifles piece-bound with rawhide. He studied the cord, the ledger, the flags. Orders are to keep the peace and secure the company's works, he told Jesse. Then to all, no rifles up. I see a hammer fall, and you sleep in my guardhouse. 2 crows stepped to the line. A string don't hold a river. It holds men if they have to look at it, Jesse said. Same rules for everyone. Hale looked to Nita. You the interpreter? I carry words straight, she said. The talk turned to inches of crest, turns per moon, and who got stock across when. Pike smiled through every number and gave ground on none. By sundown he asked again, soft as a saddle blanket, shall we sign a bill of sale and spare everyone trouble? No, Jesse said. Pike studied him. Then we do this the long way. He mounted and rode out, Silas dropping fresh stakes where the grass still showed flood. Near dark, Martha Joe's boy came from town with a note from Ed Brawley, the fall buyer. Jesse opened it under lamplight. The line was plain. Due to construction at the Ford, I'm canceling the September take. Sorry for the bind. He folded the paper and slid it under the ledger's torn edge, like a shim under a wobbly leg. Nita watched his face. You could sell, she said, and drink store coffee the rest of my life? He shook his head. This is where the herd drinks. This is where folks cross. Captain Hale posted 2 sentries and nodded. Beyond the yard, the company flags squared against the dark. Jesse checked the red cord, tested the knot, and left it humming in the evening wind. Money gone. The Ford claimed by ink. He banked the stove and lay down with the one thing that hadn't moved from morning till night. He was not going to walk away. After midnight, the sky pressed down like cast iron. Jesse woke to Roney's hammering hooves and a thud on the door. Toby Finch, barefoot, breath cutting short. Fire! They ran to the grain shed. The south wall hissed orange and mean. Resin in the timbers made a sound like bacon on a skillet. Jesse kicked the latch, heat touching his cheeks like a slap. Pump! He barked, and Toby sprinted for the windlass, while Jesse hauled the barrel sledge from under the lean-to. Nita came out wrapped in a blanket that turned dark at the hem. Eyes steady, already tying her hair back with the same scarf Jesse had used at the river. They worked without talk, bucket to barrel, barrel to floor, wet sacks pitched against the wall, shovels scraping a trench to pull grain away from flame. Smoke lay low and tricky. Jesse ducked through it and dragged 2 seed sacks clear, then a third. The roof coughed sparks. He grabbed the iron latch of the loft hatch and felt skin go slick under the heat. The smell of scorched palm nearly took his knees. He pulled anyway and shoved the hatch open, so smoke had somewhere to go that wasn't his lungs. Back line, Nita shouted, voice flat, nothing wasted. She set Toby on a bucket chain and herself took the inside throw, sleeves steaming. The fire changed color where the wet met it and roared in frustration like a penned bull. Grain ran in a clean river down Jesse's trench, a field's work spilling out to save the rest. He took it like a man paying a bill that had come due. A brace groaned. Out, he said, and they tumbled into the yard, coughing hard, eyes leaking. The south roof sagged, then settled with a rush that blew sparks across the corral. Wet sacks did their job, hissed, went black. For a time the night was only breath and the small, glad sound of finding hot places. They saved half. The other half lay clumped and ruined, sweet, sour smoke lifting off it in lazy ropes. Jesse wrapped his hand with the torn shirt and let the throbbing find its level. Calves bawled from the far pen, thin and uncertain, as if they understood that winter had just stepped a pace closer. Nita walked the dark edge of the shed where flame hadn't reached. She crouched near a scuffed heel mark and pinched something from the ash. brass still warm. Back in the house, she laid it on the pine table under the lamp, a .45 casing with 2 letters tapped by hand on the rim, crooked but clear, SV. Jesse looked at the little shine of it, then at the new blister standing high on his palm. He didn't say Silas. He didn't say anything at all. He set the casing in the center of the table the way a man sets down a debt token, and sat quiet long enough to hear the windmill creak and settle. Nita rinsed a strip of linen, wrapped his hand, and tied it off. Neat. "You need a doctor." "I need grain," he said, and almost smiled at the truth of it. The room smelled of wet wool and singed corn. The red cord at the gate hung motionless in the window square, a line drawn in the mind as much as the yard. "You could still sell," she said, not cruel, just counting the ways a man saves himself. Jesse eased back, eyes on the door, on the night that would go on being night until it was done. "No?" He lifted his wrapped hand, felt the heat in it, and gave the words their full weight, same as he had at the river, same as he'd have to give them again if the day asked. "I won't walk away." By mid-morning, the shade under Jesse's big cottonwood turned into a room with no walls. Saddles lay like sleeping dogs, rifles piece-bound with rawhide. Elders from the 5 camps took places slow and careful. Captain Hale's troopers held back their horses. Pike came clean and smiling, Silas Vane 2 steps off his shoulder, coat hiding the weight on his hip. Nita set the ledger on a crate and smoothed the torn edge with a palm. The page that mattered was the page not there. She tapped the blank with a finger. "Late summer turns," she said. "That's where we tear each other." 2 roads nodded once. "We speak, then we write." Pike lifted his papers like a preacher. "The territory speaks already. Our dam sits here by law. We'll raise the crest 4 feet. Everyone wins. Stock watered, floods tamed." 2 crows stared through him. "Your wall takes what the river gives." Hale cleared his throat. "My orders, keep order, secure the works. Nobody raises a gun." Jesse didn't answer any of them. He walked down to the ford where Pike's survey stake stood neat as a fence picket. He rocked it out of the gravel, slung it over his shoulder, and waded knee-deep where the channel slid bright over stone. He drove the stake dead center till it bit. Then he tied a red cord from his gatepost to that stake and pulled it snug as a latigo. He faced them from the water. "That's our line, yard to mid-channel. No one crosses with a rifle up. Any shot sent across this cord costs a man his next turn at water. Costs his camp, too." A murmur went through both sets of riders. That small living sound men make when rules change while they're watching. A trooper's hand started toward a carbine, then stopped against Hale's eye. Pike's smile thinned, but stayed. "You can't rope off paper, Mr. Coulter," Pike said. "Maybe not," Jesse said. "But you can rope off men long enough to write something worth keeping." Silas spat, dark and mean. "String breaks." Nita's voice cut in, even. "Words hold if men do." 2 Roads laid his palm on the ledger, old skin against old leather. "We list turns by the moon. Set the ford open 2 days each week for herds. If the dam stands, it stands back 40 paces from the crossing. If anyone fires across the cord, he sits out a moon and pays in salt." Hale looked at the red line, then at the mixed crowd inside it. He lifted a hand to his sergeant. "We're witnesses today," he said. "Muzzles down. Any hothead goes to Cottonwood guardhouse." 2 Crows shifted his weight, jaw tight. "You asking us to drink alongside men who staked our banks?" "I'm asking you to pick a future you can live in," Jesse said. He climbed from the water, boots leaving wet prints on the gravel, and took his place by the crate. The bandage on his hand showed through where the linen had thinned. He rested those burned knuckles on the ledger's torn edge and didn't move them. Women set a pot to simmer in the horseshoe ring. The smell of meat and onions went thin on the heat. A boy from Blue Mesa hauled a clay jar to the well and started the windlass turning. The day breathed, and the talk began to take shape. Numbers and days, crossings and fines. Pike leaned close enough for Jessie to hear. That cord won't stop night work. Jessie looked at him once. Nights got ears, too. Nita dipped her pen, the cheap iron nib biting the paper. Say it plain, she told the circle. No flourishes, no poison. The nib scratched. The red cord hummed in a little breeze. Upstream, company men hammered a fresh stake, and the sound carried. But inside the shade, the first lines went down in ink, and no one reached for a gun. By late light, the cottonwood threw a long slab of shade, and the day took a breath it hadn't earned. The first to step under the red cord weren't chiefs or troopers, but women. Plain skirts dusted to the hem, hair braided tight, baskets riding their ships like they were born there. They came from Cedar Hollow and Blue Mesa, from the alleys behind Martha Joe's place, from wagon camps that moved with cattle and luck. They put down what mattered in a dry country: salt, crock jugs of milk, jerky wrapped in newspaper, rolls of clean cloth, 2 needles threaded and waiting. Martha Joe watched a Red Bluff auntie show her how to cut meat long with the grain and hang it in the stove's ghost heat. Thin as a dollar, the auntie said once, and that was all. 2 girls from Stonehorse strung a line between the gateposts and set the strips swaying like narrow flags. The smell rose, smoke, sweet fat, home ground for any hungry hour. Nita rinsed Jessie's bandage and set his palm in her lap. She worked fast, short stitches neat as fence staples. The blister had broken. The skin underneath looked like pink paper left in rain. She tied off the thread with a tug you could trust. "It'll hold," she said. "It has to," Jessie answered, and that covered more than skin. Toby Finch came clattering with a coffee tin and a pocket full of pebbles. Nita set him at the ledger crate and tapped the torn place. "Count turns with stones," she told him. "1 stone for each day the ford stays open. When the tin's empty, the gate closes." She dropped a pebble, tink, and the sound made a rule of air. Captain Hale watched from his saddle, hat brim low. He had men shift to the north fence, where they could be large and quiet. A young trooper started to grin at the jerky line. Hale nudged his boot. The grin left, the quiet stayed. 2 crows drifted along the shade, the way a knife drifts inside a sheath. There, but he studied the strips of meat, the ledger, Toby's tin, Nita's careful hands. His boys hovered at the edge. Faces set too hard, because softness is a thing men test you for. No one called his name. No one had to. He could feel how the yard had changed, how hunger and work will do that to a place. Company. Hammers rattled upriver, bright and steady. Every blow said, "We'll take what the law lets us." The women did not look up. They kept laying out blankets, kept showing Martha Joe a knot that wouldn't slip, kept telling Toby with a tilt of chin when to drop another stone. Tink, tink, time, sliding into a pattern a man could ride by. Jessie hauled a short run of plank from the pile and, with Dunn the smith, set a shallow box between 2 ruts. They tamped clay, cut a V, and let a thin ribbon of water walk from the well to a shared trough made of an old wagon bed. Kids from both sides came on short legs with dented cups, laughing low, spilling some, saving most. One boy from Blue Mesa showed Toby how to hold the tin with his thumb crooked just so. It was nothing, and it was everything. On the far fence, 3 old hands turned their faces as if sun hurt more than it did. Pride is a sore spot that never cools. Still, when the trough filled, those men stepped aside so 2 heifers could nose in together. By evening, the wind swung south and tugged the red cord, so it hummed like a thin fiddle string. The ledger lay open. The coffee was gone to scrape. The meat swung darker. Pike's flag still stood in the glare upstream. Hale's troopers still looked like iron cutouts against the sky. None of that changed. What changed was smaller. A boy counting honest. A woman showing another woman how to keep a winter from biting all the way through. A rancher leaning on a crate with his burned hand quiet and his eyes steady. "Eat," Nita said, handing him a strip. He chewed and tasted smoke and salt and the promise of not starving. Across the yard, two crows watched a child from town pour water for a child from Cedar Hollow and didn't move to stop it. When he finally turned away, the set of his shoulders had shifted no more than the thickness of a coin. The sun dropped clean behind chalk buttes. No speeches, no gun raised, just the red cord holding, the trough full, and the ledger waiting for more ink when morning came. The sky was scrubbed clean, a hard blue plate with no promise in it. Still a dull roar came off the bend above the ford, not the steady talk of spring water, but a shove, as if somebody's hand were on the creek's back. Jesse topped the bank and saw it, boards yawning at the company's trial gate, a white seam tearing along the riffle, stakes nodding like they'd been caught lying. Silas Vane stood on the far riprap with two men at the wheel, coat off, grin small, no cloud anywhere, just water coming fast on a clear day. "Turn out," Jesse hollered, and men were already moving, the kind of men who know one fence post from another by the way it sounds when a hammer hits. Dunn brought pry bars and a box of spikes. Toby scrambled with gunny sacks. Two roads sent three boys for rock from the wagon grade. Nita ran to the tool rack and came back with 2 lengths of rope and that red scarf she favored as a tie. They worked the ford like a corral gone bad. Jesse set a line 2 feet above the gravel lip and made a wing of laid stone to take the first hit. Dunn drove stakes through old rails to crib the rock. The spikes rang dull and sure. Women filled sacks at the trough and shoved them down to seal gaps. Calves bawled from the high pen, sensing change as beasts do. The first tongue of the surge slapped across Jesse's boots and went thigh deep before he could cuss. "Belt me," he said, and Nita looped rope across his chest, knotted to the cottonwood stake he'd planted yesterday. The knot sat clean and close to the body. "Don't let go unless the stake pulls," he told her. She didn't answer, already tying her own rope to the next post, so nobody had to think about it twice. Captain Hale reined in at the red cord and read the mess the way soldiers read maps. His orders were a fence he couldn't step through. He took his hat off anyway, wiped his brow, and called to his sergeant, "Lend them picks and keep our boys mounted." It wasn't nothing, and it wasn't enough. The wall built ugly and strong. Water kept hitting like a team that won't take a bit. Jesse felt his legs go vague from cold and strain. The current took him to the knee, then the hip, then higher. He braced on a rail, shoved rock into a place where it wanted to jump free, and lost his footing. The rope snapped tight and slammed him flat to the flow. His breath went out in a grunt he didn't hear. "Hold!" Nita's voice close as a hand. She took the strain on the line and bled it around the stake, knees dug deep, palms burning under the scarf. Toby flung a sack that found Jesse's shoulder and wedged him enough to stand. He laughed once, a short bark at the bull-headed world, and shoved more stone into the V. Upstream, the gate crew gave the wheel another notch. The surge shouldered the new wing and found the gap Jesse meant it to, off into the old oxbow where it could spend its anger in circles instead of straight lines. Rails creaked. The crib shifted, then bit. Water split and took the long way around. Campfires hissed but didn't drown. A cook pan sailed past like a shiny turtle and lodged under the far bank. Silas watched it all, face blank now. Pike wasn't there to admire the arithmetic. Hale sat his horse like a man counting consequences. On Jesse's side, the work kept coming, rock, sack, rail, until muscle went numb and the loud in everyone's head quieted to a single word. Enough. When the push eased, men stood with water licking their knees and let their arms hang. Jesse rolled to his side, sat and found out he was shaking. Nita crouched, saw it, and tied off his rope to the stake again, just because a done thing looks better than a loose end. She pressed the scarf into his raw palm. "You're leaking," she said, and only then did he notice blood, thin as tea, sliding away with the creek. He looked at what they'd built. It wasn't pretty. It didn't have to be. The crossing still held. The camp still stood. The company's test sent a message. The Ford sent one back. Across the cord, Hale lifted 2 fingers. His men eased, horses blowing. 2 roads studied the wing and gave a small nod the way a carpenter nods at a shelf that won't sag. Toby fetched a bucket and sloshed Jesse's boots off, as if the dirt mattered. The sun slanted down and made the wet rock shine like fresh coin. No speeches, no handshakes. Just a day that could have broken and didn't. And on the far riprap, Silas Vane pulled his coat on again. Slower now, like a man cooling off from a fist fight he thought he'd win. Saturday put a shine on Mesquite's main street you couldn't scrub off. Piano gone tinny in Martha Joe's. Flies stitching the air, a mule working its jaw like it owned the place. Jesse and Nita came in with 2 roads and done, dust up to the ankles. They took the corner table by the open window where the light was hard and honest. Nita set 2 things on the plank, a .45 casing with crooked hand-tapped letters SV, and a torn wrapper from blasting powder, the sulfur stink still clinging. She didn't raise her voice. "We don't trade rumor," she said. "We trade proof." Dunn pulled a loop from his vest and rolled the casing under it. "See that shallow crescent by the rim? That's a cutter nick. I've fixed Silas Vane's press. His die kisses brass just so." He tapped the wrapper next. "And that print on the paper? Warehouse stamp from Pike's Yard. Same ink as his time cards." Folks drifted closer. Storekeeper with flour on his sleeves. Padre Miguel with his hat in his hands. 3 freighters smelling of harness. The room got that round-shouldered quiet a church gets when a bride is late. Harlan Pike walked in clean as a ledger page. Smile tucked away. Silas Vane 2 paces behind with his thumbs hooked in his belt. The crowd breathed sideways to give them room. Nita slid the casing across the table till it clicked at Silas's knuckles. "We found that in Coulter's grain shed ash." Jesse laid his Colt down beside it. He broke the cylinder and set each round on the board. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then he closed the gun on air and stepped back. No threat, no bluff, just iron and choices. 2 crows eased in from the doorway, eyes dark. "Blood answers fire," he said. 2 roads didn't look at him. "Not today." Pike's voice came smooth, baseless. "A casing on a floor means a card game, not guilt. Vane was with me last night." "He was with a match," Dunn cut in, soft. "That nick ain't luck." Captain Hale filled the entrance like a doorframe that learned manners. He took in the Colt, the casing, the wrapper, the faces. "Silas Vane," he said. "You'll bunk in my guardroom till we sort this. Hands where I can see them." Silas's jaw worked. "On what charge?" "On account of I'm not burying a town over your habit of shortcuts," Hale said. "Move." A trooper stepped, quick and polite. Silas spit near Jesse's boot and went. Shoulders set tight as braided rawhide. The room let out a breath it didn't know it held. Pike stayed. "You think a night in the post breaks my schedule? We'll pour concrete by month's end. You can point at trinkets all day." Jesse slid the wrapper back to him with 2 fingers. "Concrete don't float," he said. "Truth does." Outside, the street noise came back by inches. Hammer ring from Dunn's, a chuckle from the barber's chair, Toby clacking marbles against the curb. Padre Miguel crossed himself and went out. Martha Joe set coffee without asking, her hand shaking just enough to make a ripple. 2 crows stood at the threshold, a long beat. looking from the empty Colt to the people who'd watched a line hold all morning. He didn't nod. He didn't have to. A man can shift a hair and still turn. Pike picked up the casing, weighed it, set it down again like it burned colder than ice. He adjusted a glove he didn't need. "This isn't over," he said. Jesse didn't answer. The wind out of Chalk Buttes ran a thin finger along the window frame and was gone. Nita closed the ledger and tied its thong tight. Somewhere behind the post, a lock clicked shut on a man who liked to start fires. Somewhere upriver, trial boards creaked against their pins. In town, folks faced the rest of the day, with their eyes a little wider and their backs a little straighter. The ridge kept its own kind of dark, a close-breathing black where cottonwoods knitted the sky shut. The salt train moved careful. 2 wagons, 4 mules, boys too young for scars keeping pace with their elders. Nita rode at the rear with a hooded lantern knocked low, the light no more than a coin in a deep pocket. Salt mattered more than pride in a dry year. They reached the narrow cut where willow and rock pinched the trail. A quail clicked once, then the night split. 3 riders slid from the brush without noise, faces soot black, blades working fast, no gunfire, just hemp hawsers, parted tarp ropes hissing, a sack's throat opened clean. White crystals poured like winter onto summer dirt. "Hold," Nita called, but the word hit leather and kept going. A rider shouldered a boy clear and sent a mule stumbling into scrub. Another kicked a brake loose. A wheel rolled a foot and jammed, jerking the wagon sideways. In the jolt, a second sack tore, salt sleeting hard enough to sting. The third man slashed a marking strip from the tailboard, Mesquite store stamp, stuffed it under his belt, and wheeled away. One of the boys grabbed at a stirrup and got a heel raked across his knuckles for pay. The riders flowed out the way they'd come, hooves finding the soft ground they'd scouted at noon. Nita swung down before the dust settled. She ignored the spill and went to her knees at the trail's edge, where the brush thins to sand. Tracks tell the truth. Men hugged. A left boot print showed a rawhide patch stitched across the heel, 3 cross stitches crooked, 1 stitch missing in the corner. She knew that patch. She'd put needle to that very leather in a cold month, when a young hothead couldn't spare time to fix his own soles. 2 crows had taken coffee by her fire and let her mend what pride left undone. She set her fingers beside the print, not touching it, only measuring. Her hand remembered the distance between the nail holes. The second print showed the same shape, same fault. No store-bought boot runs that way unless you make it run that way. They shoveled what salt they could back into torn sacks. Boys swallowed cuss words and sting. Back in camp, words spun quick and ugly. White men hit our train. Company dogs bit us where hail couldn't. Rumors wearing the faces folks expected. Nita laid the cut heel mark before 2 roads, without comment. The elder looked down a long time. "Bring him," he said. Dawn made a gray smudge of the ridge. When 2 crows came in, shoulders squared, eyes cutting from face to face as if daring someone to blink. He spotted Nita, and the set of his mouth said he already knew which stitch had given him away. "Say it," 2 roads told him. 2 crows tipped his chin toward the east. "You talk peace while they set wall on our throat. A little hunger teaches better than your book." "You shamed our dead with boy work," an auntie said, not loud. 2 roads stepped forward with the feather tie. The young men of Red Bluff wear when they've taken on a man's weight. He didn't shout. He just lifted 2 crows' braid and stripped the tie free with a slow pull. The sound was small, hair against leather, but it carried. He set the feather on a flat stone. No one touched it. 2 crows stood through it, jaw locked. "I won't sign your water page," he said. "Not now, not with them watching." Nita held his gaze, and for a breath, the winter fire flashed between them. The mended boot by her chair, the way pride had softened when weather did. It didn't help. Some lessons arrive only by hitting hard things. Then you stand apart, Two Roads said, and when thirst comes, you drink where that choice leads. The circle broke slow. Men walked off in pairs that didn't match yesterday's pairs. The boys from the wagon's bandage scraped hands with jerky twine. Nita picked up the feather, then left it on the stone where it lay, an answer nobody wanted and everybody had to live with. Down in the flats, a bugle sounded from Cottonwood Post, thin in the morning air. Orders were coming. The bugle at Cottonwood Post put a chill on the flats. By mid-morning, blue coats rode out, cartridge boxes neat, sabers quiet. Colonel Frank Dwyer led, a narrow man made of orders. They drew up on the road above Jesse's yard. The red cord twitched once and stilled. Cook fires went low. Boys hid Toby's stone tin behind the ledger. Dwyer did not dismount. Captain Hale, disperse these camps, secure the dam. Any obstruction to company work will be removed. If your neutrality interferes, resign it with your sidearm. Hale rode forward. Sir, we've kept peace. The water ledger's near set. A ledger isn't law, Dwyer said. He let his gaze pass over Cottonwood shade as if it were a bad habit. This isn't a chapel, it's a trespass that found furniture. Martha Joe came from town with a handbill thick with names. Smith, Barber, Freighters, a widow's shaky script. 1 week, Colonel. Let folks fix late summer turns and set the Ford. He read the top line like a bill he wouldn't pay, tore the sheet twice, let the pieces tick down his mare's shoulder. You'll thank me for order. Wind lifted the scraps and dropped them into the wagon ruts like dead leaves. No one stooped. Everyone measured everyone else. 2 crows stood beyond the cord. Your order puts a wall on our throat, he said, softer than yesterday. Pike tipped his hat. We're ready to pour, Colonel. Delay is money. Captain, Dwyer said, clear the ford. Hale looked from the road to the line to Jesse. It took a breath to find his answer. His troopers sat their horses like fence posts, hands quiet on reins. Jesse stepped from the shade in a clean shirt, bandage brown at the edge. He stopped at the cord. This is where people finally started making sense, he said. You do your part, Colonel. My part is to stay. Nita shut the ledger and pressed it to her chest. Toby's tin clicked once in his pocket. Two Roads lowered his eyes and waited for the next inch of human nature. Dwyer gathered reins. Mr. Coulter, remove yourself. No. The word went along the ground like a low bell. Troopers heard it. Women at the cook fire heard it. Boys in the dust heard it. Upstream, Pike's crew laid square plans on a crooked creek. Hale raised a hand. No carbines came up. Hold your lines, he said. The colonel's mouth thinned. Captain, that was an order. Hale kept his eyes on Jesse. Yes, sir, and I'm keeping a war from starting on the edge of your paragraph. He turned his horse a quarter toward the dam, away from the yard. It was a small turn. It was not small. Somewhere beyond the bend, a sledge rang twice on a spikehead, then missed the third. High sun hammered mesquite flats flat as an anvil. Shadows went to ground. The red cord from Jesse's gate to the mid-channel stake hung straight and mean. On one side, bluecoats in a clean line. On the other, company hands with shovels, picks, a few shotguns sleeping under tarps. Between them came riders from the 5 camps, faces carved down to the bone of patience. Nita carried the water ledger like a Bible and set it on a crate in the open, not under the cottonwood. She laid her palm on the torn place where late summer turns should live. Sweat slicked the spine. The book didn't mind. She uncapped ink, stuck the nib, and looked up as if ink would only move when men did. Pike rode in slow, glove neat at the wrist, smile folded small for the heat. A clerk from his wagon hurried up with a paper folder. Pike fanned the air with it once. "Mr. Coulter, I'll buy your crossing and the ground it breathes on. Cash on the barrel, price you can retire on. Spare everyone months of bad tempers." He tipped the folder toward Nita, polite to the instrument that wouldn't sign. Jesse took the paper, lines and seals stacked like fence boards, solid and lifeless. He handed it back. "No." Pike let the smile breathe. "Add 20%. "No." Captain Hale edged his horse to the red cord. "Holster straps stay tied," he told both rows, voice even. A dozen carbines dipped a handspan. A dozen stayed where they were. Dwyer watched from the road, jaw a straight rule. Pike spread his hands. "You can't stand against law and weather both, Coulter. Take the sure thing." Jesse walked to the gatepost. He split the sail paper corner with his thumbnail, tore it clean across, then tore the top half into a triangle big as a palm. From his vest he pulled a short horseshoe nail and drove it through that white triangle into the red stake. The little click carried, white on red, offer on boundary, the day pinned to itself. "This ground is neutral," he said. "This crossing feeds a county, papers that forget that don't live here." Two Crows watched the nail go home. His boys shifted, not forward, not back. Elder Two Roads stood plain, hat off, the way a man stands at a grave before he says anything he'll have to keep. Hale lifted his hand shoulder high. Half the muzzles went down. The other half hung in the slack between order and fear. He didn't look at Dwyer when he said to his sergeant, "If a trigger breaks this line, it won't be ours." Nita turned the ledger so both sides could see the blank. "Late summer turns," she said, steady. 2 4 days each week. Damn if it stands. Set back 40 paces from the crossing. Any shot across the cord costs the shooter's camp a moon of water and pays in salt. The nib touched paper and scratched once, the sound small as a cricket and twice as stubborn. Pike's clerk laughed and stopped when no one joined. Pike's smile left. "You have no authority." "We have thirst," Jesse said, "and neighbors." Heat rose in waves. A fly landed on the red cord, then lifted, deciding it was a bad road. The horses shifted one hoof each, as if some old rule said, "That's all you get at noon." Martha Joe's apron fluttered at the edge of town. Padre Miguel stood bareheaded by the trough, lips moving through a prayer that remembered more wars than this one. Dwyer nudged his mare down off the road. "Captain, clear the ford." Hale didn't move. "Sir, look at them." He meant the ledger hand, the pinned paper, the cord. "If we break this with steel, we own what follows." Pike eased a boot in the stirrup, persuasion turning to push. "Start the pour," he called, and 2 wagons rattled toward the riffle with boards and sacks of cement. Jesse stepped into the water to his ankles, bandage hidden under fresh wrap, and put his palm on the stake he'd driven yesterday. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The touch said a man can be a hinge when nothing else will swing. 2 Crows slid his horse to the line until its nose shadow fell over the cord. He took the tie from his wrist, the young man's feather he no longer wore in his hair, and tucked it in his belt like a memory he wasn't done being angry about. "If a shot comes," he said to no one and everyone, "I know where I'll spend it." "Don't," Nita said, eyes never leaving the page. "Make me write better." The first cement sack hit the wagon bed with a dull thud. Somewhere out past the willow scrub, a jay scolded the way jays do when men bring trouble into their trees. Hale's hand hovered where orders live before a man owns them. Jesse's hand stayed on the stake. The red cord waited, humming a note only nerves can hear. The day leaned. The air held its breath, and out beyond the cottonwoods and brush that had watched 100 bad ideas, something shifted just enough to matter. It came thin as a fly's whine and mean as a promise. The first crack shaved the heat and took a ribbon of cloth off Nita's shoulder. She rocked once, surprise more than pain, and the ledger slid from her hands. Ink jar jumped, tipped, bled a black tear down the torn edge. "Contact!" a trooper barked. "Fire at will!" Dwyer shouted, voice hard enough to break bone. "Hold your damn fire!" Hale roared on top of him, and for a heartbeat the two orders fought in the air like dogs. Jesse was already moving. He caught Nita before the book hit dirt and turned his body into the line of the scrub. A second glint twitched in the willow shade where the bank kinks. The muzzle winked for another bite. Hale's Colt cleared leather and barked once, flat and final. The brush erupted with cursing and a rifle clattered out end over end. A man lurched up, hugging a wrecked hand. Silas Vane, coat open, eyes wild. Freed at dawn on the colonel's say-so to assist security. He staggered, blood pouring between knuckles like dark varnish. "Stand down," Hale snapped, pistol steady. "Any man who squeezes a trigger across that red cord goes to the cottonwood stone house or worse." On the line, blue coats twitched toward Dwyer, then back to Hale. Half a dozen barrels dipped, confused loyalties sweating through wool. On the other side, company shotguns breathed under canvas. Just one nervous finger and the flats would write its own obituary. The bush gave up a second shape, a lean rider who thought a knife was quieter than sense. He came low for the old man at the crate, the blade a quick thought above gravel. Two Roads didn't flinch. He'd stood at worse doors. Two Crows moved without announcing himself, the way a good decision sometimes does. He took the man at the waist in a tackle clean enough to make a schoolboy proud, steel flashing past Two Roads by the width of a thumbnail. They hit hard. The knife sang once on stone and lay quiet. Two Crows rose with a knee in the man's ribs and a breath he didn't waste. Nita knelt against the crate, palm pressed to her shoulder. Blood ran thin through ink and made a rust-colored print on the white gap where late summer terns should live. She looked at it, then up at Jesse. "It's not much," she said, teeth set, "but it's honest." "Honest'll do," he said, and set the ledger square again. Pike had a hand on his clerk's sleeve, dragging him backward by inches, face pale under trail dust. "Colonel, secure the site." "Your man just tried to start a war," Hale said. He kicked Silas's fallen rifle past the cord with his boot and motioned two troopers. "Wrap that hand and lock him down." Silas spat pink and choked on it. "Orders." "Mine," Hale said. "You don't get any." Across the cord, the cavalry line steadied into listening. Dwyer's jaw worked, but the sight of a town an inch from breaking, and a captain who just kept it whole, made a hard argument. He wheeled away 2 steps, then back. Reins jerked tight. "This farce ends today," he said, but softer, as if he'd heard his own echo. Jesse touched the red stake with his burned hand like a man swears in his own way. "No rifles up past this line," he said again, so even the mules could learn it. "One more shot, and every camp pays water." 2 Crows hauled the knifeman to his feet and shoved him across the cord like trash to the right bin. "He drinks last," he told 2 Roads, and there was no heat in it, just law. Nita eased the ledger open. The blood print dried fast in the sun and fixed there, a small, hard truth you could point at without yelling. Toby, white around the mouth, pulled the stone tin from his pocket and set 1 pebble down on the crate. It clicked, tink, and the day found a hinge. "Bring me a pen," Nita said. Her voice didn't tremble. Hale holstered the Colt. "Nobody moves a pore," he told Pike. "Nobody moves a line," he told both sides. Then to the field in general. "If you didn't hear me, hear me. Now, any hothead fires across that cord answers to me first." The creek muttered in its own language and kept going where water always goes. Martha Joe's apron stirred in a wind no one noticed. Padre Miguel reached for his hat and left it off. Somewhere beyond the willow, a jay shut up and let men try again. "Right," Jessie said. Nita dipped the pen in what ink hadn't spilled and set the nib to the scarred page. The first letter scratched through powder and blood. It held. They set the crate in the open because shade can make a lie of men. Nita pressed gauze to her shoulder, slid it aside, and flattened the ledger. The torn edge showed like a missing tooth. She dipped the pen in what ink was left and steadied her hand with the other, the blood print on the page brown now, hard as a seal. "Late summer turns," she said, not asking. The nib scratched. 2 4 days each week, sunrise to sundown. Herds stack on the south bank, then north the next week. No crowding the riffle. Two Roads stood with his hat off as if a prayer might walk by and need room. "Write that any shot across the red cord costs a moon of water," he paused. "Paid in salt. 6 sacks, best grade." "Written," Nita said. Jessie leaned his good hand on the crate, burned one hanging loose. "The dam, if it lives, backs off 40 paces from the crossing. 40 walked by the shortest trooper here, so there's no cheating on boots." Hale almost smiled. "Sergeant Hanks measures him," he said. "He's got the stingiest legs in the outfit." The laugh that ran the line was thin, but it held. Pike's clerk stepped up with a frown like a fresh crease. "This is irregular." "So's drowning a town," Martha Joe said from the edge, and the clerk studied his shoes. Nita wrote clean and small. "Company moves, works back 40 paces. Keeps a clear channel at the ford. No pour on market day. Any night work is treated as a shot across the line." She turned the book so Dwyer could see the words a second before they dried. The colonel's jaw made a slow square. "Captain Hale will witness," he said, a thing between concession and order. "Witness," Hale agreed. He took off his gloves and set his name with a slow hand, rank beneath it like a man signing for the storm he chose to stand in. Two Roads breathed out, a long, private sound. He put the mark of Cedar Hollow first, 3 short strokes that looked like water stepping down rock. Stone Horse followed, then Willow Ridge and Blue Mesa. Red Bluff's space waited. 2 crows sat his horse and stared at the space until it stared back. His boys watched him the way young men do when they've hit the end of their guesses. He swung down, not fast. He took the knife from his belt, not the blade, just the handle, bone-worn smooth by a dozen seasons. He pressed that handle edge along the paper's margin and left a shallow groove shaped like a bird's wing. Not a signature in any court, but the camps would read it, and the camps were the court that mattered. Pike hovered, smile returned, and wrong. "Company will not—" Jessie slid the blasted wrapper and the SV casing to the book's lip, where Pike couldn't not see them. "You sign or you explain those to every stove in Mesquite." Pike's pen made a tight, pretty name. The clerk added his small enough to hide in. Dwyer watched the ink set like wet concrete and kept his thoughts in his teeth. "Weapons," Nita said, voice even. "Lay them down while we do this. Blades, too." She didn't raise her head. Men obeyed because sometimes a steady voice is the only law worth keeping. Shotguns came out from under tarps. Colts unbelted. A scatter of knives clinked on the wagon bed. Troopers unsnapped saber frogs and let steel lean quiet against stirrups. In the open heat, all that iron looked smaller than it had a minute ago. Toby stepped forward with his tin. He set one pebble on the crate for the first ford day and a second for the next. A child paying into a bank, he understood better than most bankers. Padre Miguel crossed himself and said nothing out loud. Nita tied the thong and shut the ledger. She swayed once, then found herself. Jessie slid the book into the crook of her good arm. "We done?" he asked. "We started," she said. Two crows took the feather tie from his belt and set it on the crate corner. "A man keeps what he earns," he said, not quite to Jessie, not quite to himself. Maybe we earn this. Hale looked up the road where Dwyer sat tight in the saddle and nodded once, like a soldier saluting whatever comes after sense. "This line holds," he said. Jesse drove the little horseshoe nail deeper into the red stake until the torn triangle of Pike's offer lay flat. He kept the hammer in his hand a second longer than needful. Then he set it down where everyone could see it, head toward the creek, handle toward the town. "Now we live it," he said. By harvest, the flats had a different sound. Hammers still talked upstream, but with less swagger. The dam sat back 40 paces where Sergeant Hanks's short legs had fixed it, a shy thing beside the ford instead of a throat clamp. 2 days each week, the riffle wore hoofmarks north to south, then south to north, the current smoothing them like a hand over a child's hair. Mesquite Commons was no more than a square of swept dirt and a bench hacked from cottonwood, but it had a young tree staked straight and hopeful, Padre Miguel's doing, and a box Dunn had made with a pane of glass. Inside lay the water ledger, thong-tied, the late summer page showing that fingerprint dried to iron brown along the edge. Folks called it a seal without saying so. Jesse came in before noon, rope over one shoulder, the burn on his palm a quiet map. Martha Jo handed him coffee over the counter wire. "It's strong," she said. "That's why a man drinks it," he said, and sipped while the piano next door looked for a tune and found most of one. From the ford came the push and chuckle of cattle taking their turn. 2 crows rode at the point, boys behind him holding to the pace of the oldest cow. At the red stake he slowed, tipped 2 fingers toward the cord, faded now to a dusty pink, and eased the herd through. He didn't smile. He didn't look away either. In the middle of the riffle he stood in his stirrups and let the day rinse the last of a bad month off his boots. Captain Hale watched from the road, hat tilted back, reins slack. Colonel Dwyer was gone to a different kind of trouble 2 districts over. Pike came to town sometimes, kept his gloves on, signed vouchers in a neat hand, and left before coffee cooled. Silas Vane did not come at all. The Cottonwood stone house had a new lock and a better door. Kids ran the edge of the square, 2 from Cedar Hollow, 1 from Blue Mesa, 2 town strays who knew which kitchens put out scraps. Toby Finch knelt by the trough and dropped a pebble into his tin for the morning's ford, then fished another pebble from his pocket and made a ceremony of setting it aside for the next turn just to feel time behave. Nita walked up the street with a cloth bundle and a boy on her hip. She set the bundle on the bench and took the ledger's box key from her dress, like a woman handling a newborn. She didn't open it, just touched the glass with the back of her fingers and smiled at the stain that had made hard men accept soft words. "Still there," she said. "Where else would it be?" Jesse answered. She looked at his hand. "Healed ugly. Holds just the same." They took their coffee on the bench, shoulders not touching, but near enough for a small wind to forget itself between them. Across the way, 2 crows swung down and spoke low to 2 roads. Nothing for show. Later, he tied his feather tie to his saddle string, like a thing you aren't ready to wear, but won't throw away. Toward evening, a freighter rattled in from the south road with sacks of salt stacked square. He braked by the gate and counted out 6 toward the ledger box without being asked. Payment for a cousin who'd drawn on the wrong side of a line and lived long enough to learn why that mattered. He touched the pane with 2 fingers and went on. Jesse stood, stretched his back, and walked the red cord where it crossed his yard. The knot at the post had bleached pale and smooth. He retied it anyway, the way a man checks a latch he trusts. A neighbor paused at the fence. "Heard talk," the neighbor said. "Prices are good down country. You could sell out clean and let somebody else argue with water." Jesse looked past him to the ford where the last cows stepped light. to the square where a boy counted stones like wages, to the box with a book inside that had learned the shape of this place. He set his palm on the stake he'd planted the first day and felt it answer in wood and earth. "I won't walk away," he said. The neighbor nodded like that settled it, because here it did. The wind eased, the young tree flicked a leaf, and the creek went on saying what creeks say when men finally stop yelling over it. In the yard, the red cord hummed a note too thin for most ears and just right for the ones that had been waiting. Out here, even water remembers a man's word. If you were at that red cord with Jesse, what would you do? Comment 0 to walk away, 1 to stand your ground. 1 digit is enough. If this story hit home, subscribe and turn on the bell. More true to the bone Western tales are on the way. Settle up for the next one. I'll be waiting by the ford.